think about it, we can all think of someone who's been this big influence in our lives. It's probably someone who might have been a mentor or a role model and who inspired us or taught us all the stuff that's made us who we are today. Or it might be an event or an experience that's molded you and shaped you to become the person you are. And today, what I want to do is to talk about a big influence in my life. Someone who's taught me my first life lessons, someone who's guided me through my life and my career, taught me leadership, my first guru, if you will, or my coach number one. Yeah? They say that if there's an elephant in the room, the first thing you should do is to introduce him to everybody. And since we now have an envelope in the room, I thought I must introduce all of you to who's inside. So I've got my coach number one inside this envelope. So if I have your permission, let me try and get her out. Yep. Say hello to my kite, everybody. Say hello to everybody. She's shy. Yeah, I can see from the smiles on your faces that, you're wondering, how did a kite come to become a big influence in my life? How come a kite has been the one that's taught me all my lessons? So, what I want to do is to try and share the backstory. And in the process, perhaps, also share some of the lessons that I have learned from the kite. Hopefully, lessons which might help you as much as they help me. So let's flash back. As a little kid growing up in Jaipur, I had a dream. I wanted to fly a kite. Yeah? How many of you have flown a kite in your life? Oh, great. So if you've flown a kite, you probably know this, that the toughest thing about flying a kite is getting started. Okay? Once a kite is up in the air, anybody can fly it. As Jeffrey Boycott would say, even my mum-in-law can fly it. But getting it up, that's the tough bit. Okay? So here I was, 6-year-old kid, struggling all day in the hot Rajasthan sun, trying to get the kite to fly. Okay? I had a nice new kite, and I had, sufficient string or manja. And of course, I had carefully wound it on this old tin of cherry blossom shoe polish. And of course, for those of you who might be interested, the old tin of shoe polish was actually the accepted way of winding the string, especially if all you had to show was a learner's license in kite-flying. So here I was, trying very hard. I tried and I failed. I tried one more time and I failed. And it's amazing. Here I was trying to fly the kite, and my kite was behaving like one of those modern-day aeroplanes in Mumbai airport. Forever taxiing, waiting for ATC clearance, but showing no signs of taking off. Yeah? I tried, and I kept trying to. I talked to it, I cajoled it, and the kite seemed to be saying, no, you first need to learn Newton's law of gravity. I tried, I failed. I tried again, I failed again. I tried one more time, and I failed one more time. And that is when it struck me that I could do something different. I asked for help. I turned to my older sister, just 3 years older, all of 9. She didn't know how to fly a kite, but I asked her, would she do me a favor? Would she be willing to hold it and hoist it for me? And she obliged. And bingo, I was on my way. In a historic moment, which would probably be second only to the maiden flight of the Wright brothers, I too had flown a kite. It's interesting how that actually happened. And here I was standing over there feeling really proud. In my left hand was that tin of shoe polish with the string wound on it. In my right hand was the string that actually held the kite. And of course, in between was this little chest, all swelled up with pride. And, I could feel the tension in my hand as that kite was gently going up. And I could feel the string moving in my hand. And as the kite flew up and as the kite soared, my spirits soared too. Delight, of course, soon turned to dismay because I suddenly found that the string had gone out of my hand, and in a jiffy, the kite and the string were both gone. And all I had left in my hands was that little tin of shoe polish, and of course, I had tears in my eyes. Now, some of you probably figured that the right way to do this would have been to tie a knot on that tin to ensure that the string stays attached to it. But at the age of 6, while I was learning to fly a kite, I hadn't learned how to tie a knot. Okay? So, of course, an eventful day ended like most days in our lives. A bit of joy and a bit of sorrow. Joy, unbridled joy at having actually flown a kite, and sorrow, a tinge of sorrow at having lost the kite and the string. So as you can guess, memories of that experience have been etched in my mind. And the lessons that I learned from there have also kind of stayed with me. And, subsequently in my life, there have been several people who've influenced me. There have been teachers and parents and friends and family and bosses and colleagues, and they've all taught me something. But the kite remains my coach number one. It's the one that taught me my first lessons. It's the one that taught me perhaps my most important lessons. Helped me become a better leader, hopefully help me become a better person, and I dare say also help me become a much happier person. So what I want to do today is to try and share the 5 lessons that I've learned from the kite. Let's start with lesson number 1. And the lesson number 1 really is this. I've learned that in life, as in flying kites, getting started is the toughest bit. Getting started is really the toughest bit. It's also the most important bit. Get started. Okay? Most of us are scared to start. Most of us will try to fly a kite, make a weak attempt, and when we don't succeed, we say, actually, the sun doesn't suit my skin. Or I love to play marbles. And in the process, we miss out on the joy of flying a kite. Don't let that happen to you. Get started. Make a beginning. As someone said, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to have any chance of becoming great. Yeah? So take that first step. And that's really my first lesson for you. Just get started. You don't have to be able to see the entire staircase to take that first step, but take that first step. For lesson number 2, I think it's this really, to say, hey, ask for help. Don't be scared to ask for help. My dream of flying a kite came true when I actually asked my sister for help. Okay? But most of us, we want to go through our lives without asking for help because we are worried that asking for help is like showing that you're not good enough. It's like exposing your weaknesses, your limitations. So you don't want to do this. You want to pretend that I'm all right. But trust me, ask for help. There's a world out there waiting to help you. You only need to ask. And of course, there are many of us who feel that really there is no one to help us. And I think, those people are really like that guy, who prayed that he should win the lottery. So he prayed really hard and he wanted to win the prize in the lottery. And at the end of the week, having prayed, he'd go and check the results, the draw, and he'd find that he hadn't won. And after this continued for a few weeks, he'd pray, check the lottery results, find that he hadn't won, and he was really disappointed. And then, he just looked up at the heavens and screamed and said, it's unfair, Lord. I've been praying so hard, and you haven't done anything to help me win the prize. And of course, suddenly there was this thunder and lightning, and a voice from above said, actually, I want to help you, young man, but for God's sake, would you please go out and buy a ticket first? I think many of us in our lives are like that guy. Okay? We don't ask for help. We don't buy that lottery ticket. And then we wonder, why is it that we aren't winning the big prize? My lesson number 3, and that's something that stayed with me forever, is really about making sure that you've tied the knot on that tin of shoe polish. Small things matter. Okay? It's become almost a habit now for me that I worry about those small things. I have recognized in my life that small things are big. Small things make a big difference. So what happens, if I have to send an important mail, I'll first check. No typos. If you're sending out an ambitious business plan, check. All the numbers are right. Buying a house, read the fine print. Want to be a fantastic husband? Look into her eyes and listen when she speaks. Okay, I haven't succeeded every time at some of these. But at least I've come to recognize that small things matter. Small things are big. Okay? So become that kind of person who also starts worrying about those small things. And for me, I sometimes think that this habit of trying to make sure that the knot is tied on the tin has become a bit of a paranoia for me. And I sometimes worry. So, when I go to bed, I want to make sure, did we lock the door? As I'm heading to the airport, did I put my wallet in the bag? And did I put my photo ID in the wallet? And before we leave, did we switch off the gas? So it happens. But through all of this, I've also learned that the right metric to assess risk in our lives is not just the probability of things going wrong, but the consequence of things going wrong. We all tend to underestimate these low probability events, but the reality is low probability plus big consequence usually equals big trouble. My love affair with kites continued, and even as I was growing up, and it got a shot in the arm when I saw a movie called Namak Haram. Okay, remember that? Yeah, it's one of those movies which starred the reigning superstars of that time, Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh Bachchan. Maybe I should rephrase it. It starred the reigning superstar of that time and the forever reigning superstar. Yeah, but my favorite character in that movie was actually a kite seller. Okay, a perennially drunk poet come kite seller, played by a guy called Raza Murad. Okay, and there is a particularly memorable scene in this movie for me where he's dying. The kite seller is dying, and he's got all those kites lying around him in his house, and he states his last wish, and he tells his friends that when I'm gone, just distribute all these kites to the children in the neighborhood. And someone says, why do you want to do that? And he says, I want the kids to fly the kites. And जब लोग आसमान को देखेंगे और ये सारे पतंग देखेंगे, तो उन्हें इस हकीकत का एहसास होगा कि ऊपर वालों की डोर नीचे वालों के हाथों में होती है. Okay? When people see those kites in the sky, they will realize that the strings to the people on top are in the hands of the people at the bottom. ऊंचे वालों, ऊपर वालों की डोर नीचे वालों के हाथों में होती है. And I must confess, that's become a bit of a bedrock of leadership philosophy for me, life philosophy. It's easily the best piece of leadership advice I've ever received. Okay? Take care of those ordinary people. Become the kind of person who cares for those frontline guys. When I look at a young leader, and if I want to see what's this person all about, all I'm looking for is, how is this person with ordinary people? And trust me, you don't need to do any fancy psychometric testing to try and answer that question. All you need to do is look at, how does this person behave with a waiter in a restaurant, with a maid in the house, with the lift man in the building? How does this person behave? And I think, is that person being nice, or is that person being rude? You'll get your answers. In fact, how many of you have taken an Uber ride or an Ola ride in the last week or two? Lots of you. So what happens when you finish an Uber ride? You rate the driver. And what does the driver do? He rates you back. Okay? So let me give you a small professional tip. Okay? In a few years from now, if you're going for an interview, or if you're being evaluated by a prospective father-in-law, one of the first questions they'll ask you is, so, what's your Uber score? Trust me, it's a very good indicator of who you are as a leader and as a human being. Okay? For me, I think my own leadership style has been hugely influenced by this entire piece of kite flying. And if you think about it, when you want a kite to fly higher, when you want it to go further up, what do? You don't push it. You pull it towards you. Okay? People are like that too. Okay? If you want people to do well, pull them towards you. Don't push them. Push them and they probably won't respond. Push them harder, they'll probably fall apart, and so will you. But pull them towards you. Show them you care, and then you'll watch them fly. And I think that's something that's kind of stayed with me. And I'd probably say that become the kind of leader who cares for the ordinary people. You'll become a leader, you'll fly high someday, but remember that you depend more on all those people who report into you or who are under you or who report to you than you might ever recognize. So, as they say, make sure that you've kind of taken care of those people. Respect those ordinary guys. Remember, ऊपर वालों की डोर नीचे वालों के हाथों में होती है. All right? And that brings me then to the last lesson, the fifth one. Okay? Remember that little girl, my sister? Okay? The one who helped me, the one who didn't know how to fly a kite, but who between us ensured that we could fly a kite. Yeah. So as I recall, it was a pretty memorable day for her too that day when I flew a kite. I remember how she excitedly was going to town, telling everyone who would care to listen how she and her brother had flown a kite. Okay? That I can still picture that big smile on her face, and that big smile reminds me of an eternal truth. If you help other people, you will allow joy into your own life. Help other people and you will find joy for yourself. And that's, in some senses, been the underlying principle as I've, in my second innings in life, as I've transitioned after 30 years in the corporate world, I've kind of stepped out to speak, to write, to coach, but essentially to help other people become maybe just a wee bit better than they might have otherwise been. Okay? And therefore, when I get an email from a girl who I've never known, from an engineering college hostel in a faraway place in our country, and she writes in to say that she read my book and, it's changed the way she thinks, and she stopped blaming her parents for where she is today. And she says, thank you for it. And I say, hey, I should be thanking you, because it just tells me that in a small way, I've made a difference. It's just one person, but I've made a difference. It made a difference to her, and it made a difference to me. So for all of you who are on the threshold of your own careers, this is the thought that I want to leave with you. Become the kind of person who helps other people. Okay? Don't be obsessed with flying your own kite. Become the kind of person who helps other people fly their kites. They'll be happy, and take my word, you will be happy too. Unfortunately for us, our entire education system, our upbringing, our formative years, they all encourage us to compete with each other, not to help each other. So we compete. We compete to come first in class. We compete to get 1 mark more than that bespectacled nerd sitting in the front row of a class. It becomes almost hardwired in our minds not to help Guptaji's son when he asks us for help with that maths problem. Why? Because if you help him, he might get 1 mark more than you, and then he'll beat you to that seat in the engineering college. And that in turn will mean he'll probably get to go abroad. And that in turn will probably mean that he gets to marry that pretty girl in D block. You know what? In life and at work, I have found that the people who really do well are the kind of people who helped Guptaji's son. They may not have great report cards in college, but if you look at their report cards in life, you will find they've got straight A's. They've got A's in building relationships, in helping other people, in being great team players, and in general, making sure that together we're achieving a hell of a lot more than we might have on our own. Okay? And of course, as you embark on this journey of trying to help other people, remember, lesson number 1, get started. Get started now. Some of us will feel, I think it's a good idea. And once I settle down in life and I make my millions, then I will start helping other people and giving. Don't wait. A, you will never really be fully settled. And B, you will never be rich enough. There will always be a bigger car available in the market. Okay? So you get started right now. And I, even as I go around sharing my experiences and my lessons and hoping that I can do something which will make a small difference to someone else's life, I sometimes feel maybe I should be doing more. Maybe I should do more to try and help young students, society, our country. And, instead of just complaining about governance in our country, I should probably do something about it. Maybe join politics. But I'm never really sure what might happen if I stand for an election. But one thing I'm sure of, if I ever decide to fight an election, I know what I will want as my election symbol. Yep. You guessed right. Yeah? That's the one.